We all have our own hero's journey. We want to inspire you to live yours. That's my mission and why I started this show. Carrie Pena Reports. Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Pena. Thank you so much for being here with us today. My guest in studio is Todd Kane, the author of Hide and Seek, There's No Truth in Fear. And this book is, wow. Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you, Carrie. And thanks for having me.
We have so much to talk about. Your story is, I mean, just multi-layered, and the lessons that can be learned from your story are deep, very powerful. You are a father, a veteran, an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, a public speaker, and now author. From the back of your book, I want to share with the audience, for nearly 50 years, you played a complex and exhausting game of hide and seek with the truth. Let's start there. What does the term hide and seek mean to you?
Well, it goes back to the little child's game where you're working really hard to get away from everybody and hide and not be found, and how clever you can be. And at times, even the risks you'll take just not to be found. And it's a perfect metaphor for people that are hiding their sexuality or hiding an addiction or hiding anything that they're not proud of or that they're afraid of. Things that were probably set in motion because of words they heard when they were younger from people who maybe should have known better or thought more about what they said.
You went through quite a bit of difficult moments, quite a few difficult moments in your childhood, and I want to take people through your journey. Can you talk about how this began to unfold and how you began to live in your own truth?
Yeah. Challenges for sure. I think I was a victim of abuse when I was younger. I was a neighbor boy, and I don't recall all of it, but I do remember some specific parts of it. I share some of that in the book. Not in great detail, but just enough so you can understand where it's at. That stayed with me for a long time, and I do remember that was really the focus for the longest time in my life of that time of feeling different, of feeling less than, and even feeling compromised, because that boy made me feel like it was my fault, like I had attracted that, like I had enjoyed that, like I had stayed in it as a participant versus an unwilling child. You know, I did what I knew how to do at that age, which is a perfect thing to learn, by the way, when you get a little older and go through some counseling. You do what you knew how to do. So able to forgive that situation.
Did you suppress that?
I didn't really suppress that part of it because I had greater monsters to deal with. I had a stepfather that had designs on me, and it was more than just physical, psychological, emotional. And as I talk about it in the book, I didn't realize all of that until later, until I started to write this book. It was actually suppressed. I disassociated from it, and it's not uncommon.
Let's take people through that part of the story. I was just going to let this interview flow as it kind of needed to flow because I don't want to put an artificial boundary on how we tell your story. So your stepfather, as you remembered it for a long time, you remembered the physical abuse.
Yes.
And I read one of the chapters in there about when he would spank you, but it was far worse than a spanking.
Yeah.
And that sort of defined a lot of your childhood.
Yeah, I think there was a dynamic going on here. My parents divorced. I was 7. And a new man comes in. My father was very dynamic, very influential, very just charismatic. And so I imagine that was some big shoes to fill. I was the youngest, and I'm the youngest of 5 boys, and there was 12 years between us. So we had guys, two of my brothers were in high school, one in junior high and one in grade school, and then there was me. So there's this big gap. We know how teenagers can be. So there was this kind of aggression going back and forth between my mom and a little fight between him. And so there was this power play with the older boys. I had no power, but I was there. I was in it. And I think many times I got the brunt of that feeling of less than. Mm-hmm. And so where he couldn't really show power or have influence over them, he did so with me, my next older brother, and my mother. I wasn't the only one in that relationship that was abused. And I didn't even see the full effect of it. I mean, think about this. When my father left, there was a lot of, there was lack. And my mother was working hard to kind of keep it all together. And there was really no way we could stay together at that point. My brothers had girlfriends and they were kind of moving on, doing their things as they should. My brother Mick and I were kind of stuck. So when this new man came in, my mother got a lot of things that she wasn't getting. Not only that, but we had new clothes and we had bicycles and we had a train set and I joined the Cub Scouts. Those were the things that I remembered. And I also remember being made to feel like whatever I did wrong was my fault. So therefore it was just part of my life. So getting beat or spanked or whatever it was just like, well, it's a price I paid to be safe. And at the end of the day, I've learned for most people, they'll choose safety over integrity anytime. As a child, you're just choosing safety. I didn't know. But as I got older and got in situations like that before, or as I got older and had more situations, I learned to adapt and adjust to that.
I want to continue on the storyline with your stepfather, because as you wrote this book and you submitted some of it to your brother and shared some of it with him, and he said to you, you're not remembering the whole story.
Yeah.
That is so powerful. Can you share that?
Yeah, it was a very... I had started my spiritual journey a couple years ago anyway. My second marriage, this time to a man, was beginning to fail. Of course it was. Now I can look back and see why. And I kind of share that in the book.
And it took a long time for you to come out of the closet. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
It did. And but I had written most of this book and I was feeling really good about the story I was telling. I was like, this is great. I can help people. I can share this, whether, I don't know, one person reads it or 10. I figure if I just write this book with integrity and passion, it will find the ear it needs. And I still feel that way. And it's doing well. So there's a lot of ears out there.
Yeah.
And I think
it's about freeing yourself.
It really is. There's so many layers to it. And I'm okay with that because I didn't write it in any particular way. I just told the story. And in doing so, I started to heal. So my brother had a very different view. He was kind of in the middle. He kind of had one foot with my older brothers and one foot with me. He had to protect me, right? But he wanted to get away.
Yeah.
Well, he was stuck in that. And I think what was interesting, his take on it obviously was a lot different. And he was aware of one particular event that I share in the book that I just did not. It was gone. It was wiped out of my mind. And when he finally shared this with me, it started to trickle in.
And what he shared with you, I mean, it sent chills down my spine when I saw this. He shared with you that he had come home one day and basically caught your stepfather there sexually abusing you.
Yeah. And my brother had always said things like that, how it kind of hinted to it. And I just didn't have it. I think subconsciously I knew that if I went there, I'd find something I didn't want to find, or my survival mechanism was powerful enough to just say no. I personally think, God doesn't give us any more than we can handle. I couldn't handle it.
How old were you at the time?
11 or 12, if I get it right there. It was the spring because I could smell the rain. That's the interesting thing, I didn't remember. I didn't remember the event, but I could remember how that felt. And there's a time I tell in the book how all of a sudden this feeling I've had all of my life, tied to anxiety, depression, anger, fear, whatever, all of a sudden at that moment, that physical response was connected to the actual event. It found its way home in that moment. And it was devastating and enlightening and beautiful and horrible all at the same time, because I finally saw that my brother had carried that with him all these years, and I had pushed myself away from him because he was always trying to get so close to me and everything else, and I guess I didn't want to hear. Well, he thought I actually remembered and was blaming him and pushing him away.
When he told you the story, because you were a victim and you suffered severe trauma.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that you were living with PTSD. When he told you the story, and this was not long ago that all of this stuff has come back up.
Within a year.
Take me through what that felt like for you.
Well, as he was talking, I just went into my usual, here he goes. I'll just let him talk about whatever it is, because there's always something. My brother struggles with a lot of different things, and rightfully so. Now that I know, I mean, my relationship with him is much different. I still have to work through the habits that I have. I mean, let's face it, it's not easy, but that compassion and that love and understanding is there where it wasn't before. It couldn't exist before because I wasn't ready for it to exist.
Yeah.
So I was listening to him, and this is very detailed in the book. And it was I want to say it was easy to write because I was so aware of what I was feeling, and so it was so vivid to me, all of it. Like all of a sudden the veil was pulled back and I could see.
Because your brother then went up and beat up your stepfather, right?
Right then.
At that
it
moment,
happened.
yes.
And I was still catatonic. But as it played out, like he's talking here, kind of like, Charlie Brown's teacher, wah, 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 like, and then I'd catch a word and then the image of it would come. And I'd catch a word and the image would come, and then I could smell it and I could feel it and I could taste it and I could experience it, and it did not feel good. But my compassion and understanding for him overrode that. Yeah. So even though it all just kind of spun up and I was getting ready to just lash out and say, oh, this is all whatever, I knew it was real.
And that's the whole point of your book is, and you say it here, there's no truth in fear. And you wanted to stop being afraid and come to terms with all these different things that had happened to you in your past. And also part of that was coming to terms with who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And you talk here, and you also speak a lot about this in your public speaking career, and you're a very dynamic speaker.
Thank you.
And I think that you're on a mission to help people. But you talk a lot about words and how words matter. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, I think we're incredibly irresponsible with our words and haphazard with our words, and we can even be dangerous with our words. A lot of the things that we say are hidden in sarcasm or humor. It's just passive aggressive. It's just suppressed anger, energy, whatever it is. And I think it's become easy for us to say and even do whatever we want and then mask it with some type of humor. And it's not funny to a lot of people. And a 7-year-old or a 5-year-old or 11-year-old or even a 21-year-old might not know what a 75 or 50 or 45-year-old person is talking about. And it might not resonate with who they are, what they believe, or what their truth is. But we seem to think that we can just say and do whatever we want. And a lot of people are doing that now. I tend to believe that we should just go back to the idea of the golden rule. Do unto others as you've had done unto you. Think about your child. Who's talking to your 5-year-old? What's your 7-year-old listening to when you're not around? It might be completely different from what your belief is, and if you're not connecting at the dinner table or not connecting before they go to bed or not just having a walk with them and discussing these things in your home, just like the chicken pox, just like coronavirus, just like anything else, it will find its way home. Mm-hmm. So not only do the words matter that we say, just in casual conversation, but also the words matter to our kids, or what you should be listening to, or being mindful of what you hear. That's part of it.
And part of this was your journey and figuring out or understanding yourself. When did you realize that you are gay?
I knew. Well, I naturally went to the bisexual thing. I do find women attractive. I was married to a woman, and I was very happy in that relationship for a long time. It was completely integral in it. It wasn't until the end of our marriage when things start to, and I talk about that too with the military and everything else, when the constructs I was having and everything else started to shatter. There was two things at play here in the book, by the way. One was the abuse, and one was my ego. When you're told you can't get it done, you're never enough, you're not whatever, I had to exaggerate everything. I was the overachiever, and I didn't do it for me. I did it so that you would love me and respect me and like me and care for me and not be a threat to me. You were either for me or you were against me. And if you were in the middle, I'd give you one shot. And if that didn't work, boom, I'd just go to standoffish or bully, or I'm smarter than you, or I'm more accomplished than you, or whatever. I'd intimidate. I was a bully in many ways because I was protecting myself. That's why I can really relate when I see someone being hyper-masculine. I get it.
And you talk here about one of your chapters is titled Manipulate. This was something when I read this. I'll just read the beginning. Every victim needs a perpetrator. They don't even have to be willing. I'm so sensitive to manipulation that I physically get ill when I witness it. Sometimes the manipulator doesn't even recognize the behavior until they get the hang of it, and then it becomes a tool to gain the illusion of control. What does that mean to you?
I get chills because I realize how I've been manipulated in my life and how I've manipulated. In order to be safe in many situations, you have to kind of get a control of the environment. You can't be in control all the time. That's why it's a complex and exhausting game. You can't be in control, but if you're not, you're afraid. If I leave myself exposed, if I let down my guard, if I drop my wrist, if my voice drops a little bit, if I laugh at the wrong thing, or I get in the wrong sexual conversation, what am I? I'm the fag, I'm the this, I'm the that, the words I heard. I didn't know what those things were. I just knew I didn't want to be it. And what are those things anyway? Everybody is their own. You talk about, are you gay? Are you gay enough? Are you too gay, high gay? We're this, we're that. I am who I am. I am enough, whatever that is. But those words, they sit, and I still hear words, and they click me, and they trigger me. We all have skinny or pimples or heavy or whatever it is, you know?
That's why you focus so much on the words matter.
Yes.
And that is one common theme that you write about in the book and that you speak about and you teach people about. And also you had to help yourself heal so that the self-talk wasn't damaging.
Yeah. That's a big part of it too. It's not just about, this book really isn't about other people. It relates to everyone. There's something in there for everyone. And that's kind of the reason why I wrote it that way. You know, there's something to be learned by all of us, from all of us. I mean, we're all connected. And you'll see as I go through, it's the words, not just what I heard, but then, you know, what I used, how I used them, and how they changed, and how I started to use the words to affect me in the proper way. And then being very mindful of how my words affect other people. You
tell a story in the book of when you came out to your father and how you were nervous about how he might react. And I'm paraphrasing here, but you said, what is the worst thing you can think of? And he said, are you sick or dying?
Yeah.
And then you proceeded to tell him, and he said something to the effect of, it's okay, just kind of keep your life to yourself, or keep that part to yourself. How did that make you feel? It was on one hand, I imagine it was a bit of a relief because he didn't freak out.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, he was kind of saying, all right, keep it on the down low.
Yeah. It was profound. That's why it happened just like that. I said, well, he was, what's wrong, son? What's wrong, son? He sat there, and my father very seldom sat for a minute and paid attention to one thing. And he was really paying attention to me. And I said, what's the worst thing a son could tell his father? And he goes, well, are you sick? Are you dying? And I didn't even have a chance to process it because I thought, well, no, that'd be worse, wouldn't it? And I told him, and he said, well, we all have our secrets. You just got to keep that stuff to yourself. Mm. And it wasn't what I was expecting, but it wasn't what I was expecting.
Right.
I mean, I talk a lot about my father in this book, and I didn't really expect it to. There's a lot of similarities between my father and I, and a lot with my mother too. But I think just the whole male thing, the whole patronage thing, patriarchal thing throughout the book, right? Was a natural theme to follow. And I could relate to my father. You know, he'd made choices. He'd been through 3 marriages, and they had kids and those things, and that didn't affect them very well either. You know, I'm sure there was a lot of regret, you know, and I saw him kind of come to terms with those things later in his life before he passed away, you know, and some of them he resolved and some he didn't. But I didn't love him any less. In fact, I loved him more because I saw the vulnerability, and I saw him come to terms with it and acknowledge it. I saw him go through what I went through, just in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. What was it like for you navigating your service to the country? You became a captain in the U.S. Army. And at that time, were you closeted?
Yeah. I was married, kids.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I didn't expect to do the service. My stepfather said, that's the only way you're going to get an education. So I said, I'm not going in. So I got a scholarship to dive at the University of Northern Iowa. And I did that for a year, but I wasn't disciplined. My grades were slipping, and I didn't deal with stress very well, obviously, right? I just didn't. And every time you change your environment, you have to get accustomed to it. And I just didn't get it. It was very difficult for me. Well, one day my friend and I said, well, let's join the Army. And so we did. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life.
In what way?
It taught me my value and my worth. Even though I looked outward, externally, for all those things, the nice thing about the military was there was a system. You do this, this, and this happens. You do these things, you get promoted. You follow these rules, you succeed. That was very different from what my stepfather did. I would do what he asked me to do, and he'd change the rules. I could never succeed.
He was a master manipulator.
He was a master manipulator, and he used that. So not only did I feel crappy like I failed, but then I was punished too. Like I couldn't, and what that also taught me to lie when the truth sounded better. I was trying to find his answer. Blue, yellow, red, what? No, yes, no, maybe, it didn't matter. And sometimes he'd let me, I'd maybe trick him a little bit or whatever, and I'd get by a little reprieve. Well, that was a bad lesson for me too, because then I learned I could have success by doing that.
That's how you became manipulative.
That's how I learned to manipulate. I didn't want hurt. Horrible lessons, but then lessons that I can share with other people. And we've all learned them one way or another. You could be in an interview, right? And they ask you a question that goes wrong. You quickly shift and go the other way, and you navigate your way through it.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what we do when we teach people, when we do media coaching. You teach them how to pivot. So the service turned out to be a very beneficial thing for you.
I loved it, and I was good at it.
What happened along the way with your stepfather?
After that happened, after the abuse happened, within 3 or 4 years, he was gone.
How did your mom react?
She didn't really. And I didn't know that or understand that. And I think that's another reason that I didn't need to know that. Because when he was gone, we reconnected. And I realized now that I wasn't the only person in that relationship that was abused. Can you imagine? You know?
It is. The whole thing is really hard to imagine.
I mean, there was times when we would be punished in front of her. And she would say, tell your mother, go ahead, confirm. And so she'd have to say, yeah, you guys need to pick up your stuff. There was always a reason for not doing it, right? And it's so crazy because he was in the military too for a short period of time. And I remember he'd use tactics like sleep deprivation. Like what is a 9-year-old doing at 3 o'clock in the morning out working in a garage?
And he wouldn't let you go to sleep.
Until it was done.
That's horrific.
And then, well, when you're like that, then what can be done to you?
So you go on and you share all of these stories. And then at some point you say here, and I love this because I use this phrase myself, but stop surviving and start thriving. And one of the notes I want to make for the audience, you and I discussed this before we began the show, was that this is not a victimhood book. You really don't write it in terms of poor me. And it's interesting because you have every right to feel like a victim, but you have not approached it that way. So when you say stop surviving and start thriving, tell me about that.
Well, that was from my mother. After my stepfather left, my mom and I reconnected right away. My brother had left. My older brother had graduated and went to community college and then started working. And I was there with my mom. And we were just there for just another, like a year and a half, almost 2 years together.
16?
16, 17. Yeah. I turned 18 just before I graduated. I was the little one. I always looked like a midget. I was like, this is a tiny little thing. I was just a little guy. But, big heart. And always young looking. So
you still are.
I said, well, thanks.
Yeah.
But, so I had that reconnection with my mother. Interesting, as time goes on, fast forward, some of my aggression and as I would fight certain feelings and just because I knew that I was attracted to men and liked men and wanted that relationship with a man, it's funny, I would take it out on my mom. I'm sure some of it was that, but I didn't know. So, right? And she took it. And I think the interesting thing is, I think I knew that she would never not love me. I think sometimes we're hard on our parents.
Yeah.
But in the end, are they going to leave us? So I guess when my kids are a little rough with me, I go, oh, you love me so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for loving me that much. I'll never,
How old are your kids now?
20, they'll be 27 and 22 this year.
How do they feel about you writing this book?
It's just part of our story. I mean, I dedicated the book to my ex-wife. She said, look, just remember, all that we went through and be happy, and it'll all be worthwhile. You know, I just had a conversation with her yesterday. We were talking about something, and it's just, I'm blessed. She's an amazing woman, you know, and there's a lot of ways that people can love. And for a long time, it was that kind of love. You know, now it's a little different love. But the bottom line is we have a very unique family. We understand each other and acknowledge each other, and it's just part of it. I'm not a victim. I was victimized, and a lot of people are victimized. And you can stay in that. You can. I mean, the universe gives you an opportunity to be that way all your life if you want, as long as you want. It also gives you an opportunity to go, let me get some help. All right, let me find a new tribe. Let me do something different. You know, I mean, I have faith, but without action, it's dead. So you got to put action behind your faith. You have to get up and move the change forward, move the needle forward. And that's kind of what this book does. It kind of takes you through it.
You say here, truth gives you peace. So after you finally put all the pieces of your life together and you really allowed yourself to go to that space and to realize your truth and to come to terms with all the things that had happened to you and that you also felt responsible for, taking accountability, how did that feel? Well,
that's really the key to a successful life, I think, is to be your own life. You have to take responsibility and have accountability of your life. We're just not along for the ride here. I remember you used to say, I'm just finding my way. Well, you need to navigate, because that takes intention. Mm-hmm. Look, when I was a teenager, AIDS hit, and I liked boys and girls. I made a choice. The world was consumed by fear. I made a choice, and that truth was suppressed. It never lost its power, just my voice. And then I went into the Army. Don't ask, don't tell. Oof. That was a big test of my integrity. And I thank God that I had that experience, because there's a lot of people that just say, well, I'm done. I'm okay now. I'm out. It's all good. And that's good, right? But I'm glad I made some good choices. I'm glad that because I felt for a long time I had no integrity. It ate at me. It wore at me. Here I was, a successful guy in the military, doing all these things, every medal, everything, you name it. But I felt like there was a kink in my armor.
Was there anyone that you could talk to, any of your fellow members of the Army, or you kept it?
None.
Why?
Well, then I would expose myself. I didn't have a lot of friends either. It was a pattern in my life. I can't get too close to you, Carrie. I mean, what if we laugh and giggle about something or whatever? It's too bad. A lot of my friends said, you know, it was rough. You were rough sometimes. We loved you, all that kind of stuff, but you kept your space. You kept your distance. I wish I hadn't, but that was part of my story. That was part of my protection. That's how I hid. And look, if I hadn't done all those things, I wouldn't be right here. You know, you look at this whole thing, it's divine. It's divine. The whole thing's divine.
Do you feel that when you got out of the service, when was that? When did you?
2000. Were
you anxious then to allow yourself to live? Because that seems like an awful lot to hold inside.
I'll just say, this is one of my favorite parts of the book. I went from no one's ever going to love me, right? Or no, I'm sorry. I went from I want everybody to love me. I want everybody to love me, right? To I don't care if anybody loves me. I have my truth now. To no one's ever going to love me again. And I won't get in that piece of the book, but there's a point where I had another traumatic experience, you know, because I was incapable of navigating. You know, again, when I talk about this in the book, it's you isolate ourselves. We isolate ourselves from our loving sources, our family, our friends, our spiritual centers, you name it. And then we're an island, and we go and we hide in dark places, and a lot of times we find dark things there. We also find other people hiding. Yay, no, that's like commiseration, collaboration. That's a false sense of security.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the metaphor of you're playing hide and seek and the three girls or the four boys hide behind the one tree. You know that you can be seen, but there's this illusion that you're safe. It's not. And so for me, it's just a matter of finding your way, right? And navigating through these troubled times and living your truth.
I love one of the stories you told about how your mom always liked to listen to talk radio.
Yes.
Yeah. Which, you know, can be painful at times, especially for a little kid. But one show in particular you really loved.
I love that show. I mean, they had the Lake Wobegon ones and all these. My mom was an Avon district sales manager. After she was an Avon lady when I was younger. I talk about that in the book. But she was a manager in her in my teens, and so sometimes I'd go with her and ride and whatever because she had a long ride, or I'd help her with some of her meetings. I'd go help and set up. And she always used to talk radio, like, Mother. She goes, shh, shh, shh. Well, there was one show, and it was Paul Harvey. And have you ever heard it?
I know who Paul
I
yeah.
love this guy. I mean, he would say, Paul Harvey, good day, right? And then he would say this part where he'd say, he'd go through this, weave you through this magical story, and it could be about Ronald Reagan or Mark Twain or something, right? Or a famous dog. And you just listen to it, and you're just dragging you through it. And I would deliberately not try to figure out who it was. Because if I figured out beforehand, I'd be like, oh, disappointed me, because I really wanted that reveal. And right at the end, he'd give you this last little piece of information. He'd say, now you know the rest of the story. And
in his great voice.
I know, right? I wish I had that voice. And it's interesting because I wrote a lot of this in that way. Which is kind of like my life, right? Here's this, then the reveal. Here's this, then the reveal. And it just came out that way. And as I was reading it, I go back and edit, I go, wow, I'm writing like that. And I made that connection. So that was kind of my homage to him.
It's the rest of the story.
The rest of the story. You know, I wrote this the first way with a very different story in mind. I had a very different idea of who I was and what I experienced. And I had to weave the truth in. I didn't know what I was going to do. I stepped away from this thing and I said, I can't do it.
Well, I'm always curious when people write books, what was the impetus? Like, why originally did you think, oh, let me write a book?
My marriage to my ex-husband unraveled. And I can look back at everything that happened and assign it to something I learned or failed to learn, and to the same thing that I was always struggling with my truth. And I was afraid of everything. I was afraid to be afraid. If I let myself be vulnerable in any way, I didn't know what was going to happen. I had to be strong all the time and control all the time. And as I started to become more spiritualized, I started to realize that, you know, I was raised Catholic. I don't necessarily connect with that anymore. I do believe in Jesus, and I am Christian that way. I don't know that I practice like other people. I'm just spiritual.
Yeah, and your spirituality is woven throughout.
Yeah, it is what it is, and I couldn't hide that either. You know, I didn't. It was interesting. I just let go. I didn't really think about it. When I went back and edited, I started to kind of second guess myself, and I went, stop it.
When you started writing, because we oftentimes don't realize what an explosive story we each have to tell, right? Mm-hmm. So when you started writing it, it's just your story, you've lived it. Did you look back and go, oh my goodness, I've really got a story here?
My daughter is co-editor on this book. Mm-hmm. And I floated her 2 or 3 of the first chapters that I wrote in the beginning, like when I first started writing, because I wrote the book sequential. It came out just like the story, which was kind of a blessing with a memoir. And I thought at some point I had to check myself. I wanted to make sure that, you know, do you want to be in it and that kind of thing. I just want to be respectful of everything. But something told me I needed to. It was her. It was her. And actually, she's not in the book. And there's a reason for that. She was editing it, and I sent this to her. I said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And she said, "It's kind of tough. It almost sounds a little victim-y." And I said, "Okay." And then she said, "By the way, sometimes you can just say there was a car accident. You don't have to tell all the details."
Oh, that's interesting.
Wasn't that powerful?
Yeah, that is powerful. And that's how you wrote the book. So you ended up taking your daughter's advice, because your chapters, you sort of tell what happens in each stage of your life, but you don't belabor the point.
Well, I wanted to connect. I want you to belabor the point. Isn't that the point? I mean, what am I sharing? You shoot a basketball a lot different than I do. The way you taste ice cream is different than me. The music you like to listen to. There's something to be learned in all of that. There's something to be shared. And I just want to give you this perspective. But I also want you to be able to go, wow, you know what? That reminds me of my nephew. Oh, that was me when I was younger. My family was kind of like that. I do that. I've had some friends who have connected with me from all around the globe. I have a lieutenant that's in China who does air filtration system. You know how busy he is, but he got wind of this and sent me a message, and it's like, wow, right? Like I never thought of that. And oh, by the way, I just talked to my 11-year-old son.
Wow.
Right, because he said, you made me realize that I could not do it.
I do want to hear because you've been having amazing responses and the book is doing really well. I want to read, though, the end here. And the chapter is titled Find.
Are you going to give it away?
Oh, do you want to read it? You know what? Actually, let me have you read it. Right here where my arrow is at. I love your voice anyway.
Now, every time I do this, I cry.
I want to hear it.
Oh, you can't make me do this.
Lay it on me, bud.
This is like people read. Actually, when I gave this book to my ex-wife, she was in my chair. I was doing her hair. I go, here it is. And she turned to the last page and read it. I go, you read the last page? She goes, yeah, I lived this. I go, ah. She goes, I'll read it later. She read it in 3 hours. Okay. I often believed I was one failure away from losing myself altogether. I had succumbed to fear and empowered others with the one choice only I could make, loving myself. My faith gives me hope, and truth gives me peace. The truth is, I've always been enough. I am special. I am a gift. I am Todd Kane, and as it turns out, the miracle I was hoping for.
Was that hard to write those words?
No. It's nice to feel them. You know, it took me half a century. The last piece, to put the I am, that's why everything is I am. You got to own it. You know, the two most powerful words, I think, in the English language, or in any language for that matter, is I am. I mean, it's better than I'm not.
Yes.
Right?
It's really powerful. It's the whole thing. So tell me more about the responses that you've been receiving and how that has helped you know that freeing yourself and living in your truth, not only living in it, but allowing others to learn about it, because that's truly exposing you in a very raw way.
The tagline is really important. And a friend of mine helped me come up with it. We were talking about it and we played a little bit and I said it in one way. She said, say it this way. And I said it that way. And we sat on it for a little bit. Is that true? Is that true? And we kind of went back and forth. And I went and took like a day and go, it's true. There's no truth in fear. Fear is an emotional response. It's something that may happen, may not happen. It's not until it happens that you can really acknowledge that it did. It's really an anticipation of something that may or may not happen. And if we are spiritual beings in a human experience, then we have some say in our choices. One really profound experience, there's a person mentioned in the book, my stepsister, the one I was jealous about. She wrote me. She read it. And she said, well, actually, she was her and my stepmother and my sister, my stepsister. This is the second one my father left my mother for. And they were talking online, going back and forth, and I jumped in and said, here's the link to get it, whatever. I didn't realize who they were. Wow. And so I'm blah, blah, back and forth. And then my stepmother messaged me, my former stepmother messaged me, and she goes, you know, you're always a good boy. Don't worry about that stuff. And again, there's no truth in that fear. My family did not reject me. My friends didn't reject me. My mother, my father, my lovers didn't reject me. I did. And that was the complex and exhausting game. I never thought I was enough. The experiences that I had taught me that, and then they were reinforced with words and stereotypes and archetypes and you name it. And all of a sudden I just became this person, sometimes an imposter. That's sad. I don't take anything away from the love that I gave or the relationships that I had. But I for a moment there I wonder, but I thought it doesn't matter to wonder. I couldn't be right here, right now, having this conversation, having that book, if it hadn't happened the exact way that it did.
The way you just said that, that it was a complex and exhausting game. I'd imagine that resonates with so many people about their own lives and life being so exhausting all the time.
Yeah. That's why truth gives you peace. It says set you free, but the purpose of being set free is to have peace. To look at the things, the choices that you made, and acknowledge them. Look, and I say this in the book. It's a series of choices. Everything's a choice. You choose to either like or dislike something. You choose to have whatever I say affect you or not. It's not even. I'm mindful of it, right? And I do things with intention, but I can't predict how you'll feel. And then your choice sets off a whole nother set of choices. So at the end of the day, you make a choice. You evaluate how it affected other people, and if that's in keeping with who you are, right, and what you believe. And if you didn't like it, you make it right, and you make the next best choice.
So how is your life today?
Better. It's funny. Once you realize that you are enough, you realize you have enough. I struggled. I was at the top of every game I played. I really did. And then I get right to the top and I go, I don't deserve this. Hence the fall.
Yes.
And then the triumphant rise, every decade. Yeah. My mom's like, you can stop surviving now. You can start to thrive. I'm like, what a concept.
Do you feel peaceful?
I do. It's interesting. I think fear is a fraud. And I think we are fooled by fear. This world is fooled by fear. And I think we're at a heightened state of fear. It seems like every time I have a significant life event, we're in that state. AIDS. I remember the chaos that was going on in Florida at the time when in that last election. It was between Bush and Gore and all that kind of stuff. And everybody was kind of back and forth.
The hanging chads?
Chads. We haven't fixed that. But there is a lot of fear. And we lash out and we say things and we polarize. And I think that's something that we need to address. And it starts with our words. We say things based on how we feel and not how we think. I talk a lot about that in the book as well, how I'm influenced, how we are influenced. And when you talk about manipulation, and you talk about influence and manipulation, it's only just a matter of intent. Well, you can also have poor intent too. Have a bad intention and think you're doing something good. We talk about integrity too. Someone could be operating with the idea that the world is flat, and that's what they were ever taught. And that's what and they fight and they defend that and they live that. They are operating with integrity. That's what they believe.
It's what they believe.
Right? It's tricky, right? Truth is, and truth also evolves. The things that I thought my truth was, right? And now here I am. And so in that lesson, I can look at other people and just kind of acknowledge our differences instead of, we don't have to accept people. We don't have to respect people. We really don't. It's a choice. But I think if we're going to survive as a civilization, as a species, we have to acknowledge each other at least, and maybe at least fall back on the golden rule. We can build on that, but I certainly would want to treat you the way I'd want to be treated.
In your coaching and speaking now, you have some clear missions. I want to just read an excerpt from your website. Everything we do is designed to move you toward a life of authenticity, manifesting healthy and fulfilling relationships, thriving in the workplace, and gaining a new perspective and respect for yourself. Together, we will find the joy, love, and abundance that you've been missing.
Yeah.
That seems to be the current state of where you are. And now you can teach. How great does that feel? It's
a beautiful gift. The next book is entitled Find. Hide, Seek, Find. And I started writing it right after I wrote it. Actually, there was 55,000 some odd words in that, but who's counting? There's 65,000 in the notes. I just didn't. Again, you want to make your point and leave it to the reader. But from that, that's how I found my way back. We make choices based on faith and fear. That's the F, right?
Yes.
And then we have to operate with integrity. That's the I. The N is for navigation, not finding your way, but navigating with intention. And then D is simply decide and do. And that's what I've done. And I've done it all my life in different times for different reasons, not always with integrity, not always with the right thing, but the model is there. And as this played out, and as I had to go through counseling, I still go through counseling. I'm treated for PTSD. I use EMDR. There's a lot of different things that I go through, and it's part of who I am.
Mm-hmm. I've heard such amazing things about EMDR.
It's spectacular.
I've done shows on that. Yes.
Yeah. And it's just a matter of how you're wired and how we learn things, and why not use the science?
What would you say to, now this man right here, standing your book cover, by the way, is absolutely incredible. What would you say, though, to this person on this cover at age 17, 16, 15, to your younger self?
Oof. Well, what I'm saying to everybody now, you're already enough. You're already enough. You're exactly who you are, where you are, and why you are, for whatever reason that is. You're perfect and wonderfully made. And the sooner you connect with that, and people that help support that and acknowledge that and love that and nurture that, the healthier and better your life is going to be.
So in this next chapter, because you put it out there openly, so I don't want to out your age, but I think you're 50, you said. Mm-hmm. So you've got the next chapter.
I have a whole another 50 years or so to go.
I mean, how it just, as we close out, because I think this is important for people who, because sometimes if you're in a dark time, you can't see, they listen to this interview and it's like, wow, you've done a lot of work to get to where you are. But I like to give people hope. That they can see the end of the tunnel, that they can see the light. And you are that hope for a lot of people because you have walked this incredibly difficult road and you're standing in the light.
I am in the light, yeah. And faith's a big part of this. I think we, for whatever you take of it, I think there is a little difference between religion and faith or spirituality. And you can argue that whatever you want, but the bottom line is we are a part of something larger than ourselves. And whatever made the stars is literally in our body. The carbon is in our body. We are all connected one way or another. And whether you find that faith in something, someone, or even just yourself to start, then start with that. Because faith is what you have when you can't trust. Right? Trust is to know, is to have and experience. I think people forget. I think when you go to Webster, it says in faith, it's about having faith that your brother will show up at noon. Well, that's not faith. That's trust because it had happened before. It's in the unknown.
Yeah.
Guess what? So's fear. Isn't that crazy? Faith and fear are pretty much the same thing. You're just choosing what it is.
Right.
It's the unknown. Well, I choose to do and be my best self, my highest self. And I choose to associate with myself and inspire others to do the same thing. And we'll all move the needle and the change to that way and be better and be stronger and healthier, right? More and coexist better, yeah. I think. We just need to watch what we say and really think about the other person for a minute.
Words matter.
They do.
Hide and Seek is the book. There's no truth in fear. Todd Kane, where can people find you? I am on Amazon.com. and on BarnesandNoble.com, and I'm in all the Barnes & Nobles here in Arizona. And your website? IamToddKane.com. Congratulations. Thank you. This book is profound, and I really think that you have the opportunity to touch a lot of lives, which is a really wonderful thing. Me too, and I accept that responsibility. It's been a gift, and I'll use it wisely. Thanks for having me today. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for listening to our podcast, Carrie Pena Reports. Until next time, take care.